Hi and welcome to this video about how to build my ultimate drill press platform. And in my last workshop video I showed you my ultimate drill press table and asked if you were interested in the how to build video, and you were very clear about that. So here we are. And this will be a slightly different video, so I'm a bit excited about what you think about it. I decided to take more time to explain why and give some tips and tricks and some alternative ways of doing the same thing. And as a result, the pace is slower, the editing not that fancy, and I'm a bit unsure if this is a good or bad thing. So let me know in the comments what you think about it. Your remarks can improve my channel. In the description of this video I will add a lot of links to products I use in this project. All these products I can recommend, and of course when you think some are interesting for you, using my link will support my channel. Thank you. So here we go, and I hope you will enjoy this video. The most significant difference between my drill press table and a more common table is the connection of the fans at the side. And I told in my former video that this was the only way to guarantee that 2 rows of holes would be perfectly aligned. And there was some debate in the comments about that. The fact is that a drill bit is round, and because of that it should not matter at which angle your fans is to your platform or drill bit. Your holes will always be in a perfect line. For me, the second row of holes is important, and I want them perfectly aligned with the first row. Now the angle does matter. If my fence is not straight to the platform and I use the stop locks at the same position and slide the fence back and forth, the second row will not be aligned to the first row. This will only be the case if the fence is exactly perpendicular to the movement, and the only way to guarantee this is to attach the fence to the side. When I tighten the fence, it always moves back in the same line relative to the side. You only have to assure that this angle is precisely 90 degrees. So I hope this makes better clear what I mentioned in my former video. When we look at the platform itself, we see it consists of 3 layers. The black MDF on top and 2 layers of birch plywood. And the last layer, however, is only a thin strip to align the table to the original platform of the drill press. And I use some leftover plywood, but I would not advise using plywood HPL. It will not glue together and you have to add screws because of this. I use a round inlay in this drill press table, and the advantage is that you can turn the inlay and create a clean underside. With a square inlay you can only move it 4 times. And first I started with a tabletop and drew the lines on how I would organize it. And I use a lot of black MDF, so a white Pica pencil is perfect for this purpose. It is only for reference purposes and to avoid mistakes. To cut a hole in the tabletop I use a template that I created with a laser engraver. And I did not only cut the circle, but a complete template I could use to align it with the underside of the platform. I drew a center line on the template and platform to make aligning them easily. And I use a small spiral bit for these templates. Because they are thin, they are suitable for cutting, and because of the spiral structure, this goes very smooth and with a perfect clean cut. And this is the actual speed, so it cuts very smoothly. I use an upcut bit, so it does not have to be necessarily a compression bit, which is much more expensive. I use an upcut bit because this improves dust extraction in combination with the router table, and with MDF you do not have to worry about splinters at the underside. You would think I used the inside circle of the template I made for the hole, but I made a new one for this insert because I wanted it to fit very neatly. I use a more significant spiral bit because this is more convenient in this situation than a thinner spiral bit. And working with a template works very accurately, so this insert fits perfectly. Because I use other timber as insert, there's no guarantee it has the same thickness as the platform stop. And in my case it was a bit thinner, so I placed some tape on the underside to align it. To prevent dust from accumulating, I made some slots on the bottom of the drill press table. When dust is accumulating, I just have to turn the insert to slide it into the grooves. And I made these slots with my handheld router, and when I use my smallest guide drill, I also like to use my smallest Vonson square, which keeps the weight low. I had to set up my router and set the depth at 5 mm. I made some lines where the slots should come and placed some stop blocks at my guide rail at the right spot. And now it was just a matter of aligning the router with the lines. And even though this should not be that difficult, I managed to let the router lift slightly at the second slot. And instead of making another pass, I continued and could not fix it later. Now it was a matter of gluing the two parts together. And despite my mistake, I am in my happy zone at this moment. And you can tell everybody this is a song. As I mentioned earlier, I used some leftover wood, but the HPL does not make a strong connection with the MDF, so I had to add some screws to it later. Before I show you how I add the different miter tracks, I want to show you the fans because this is what makes my drill press platform so different. And although I made it unnecessarily beautiful, if you take a closer look you see a lot of different lines and shapes are there for a specific reason. Where the fence connects with the side, it needs mass to be solid and rigid, so I made it wider at that point. But in the middle it needed to be smaller for the maximum capacity of the drill press and for a more convenient way of securing it into the miter track. So some angles ask for some creativity to cut. I wanted the connection plate glued inside the fence for more strength and stability, so I started to make this groove. And there are probably a few ways of doing this, but I want to show you two. And the first is with a curve maker. And this is a small tool that helps you to determine the correct size of the groove. And it's basically doing this by compensating the curve of your blade. So first we set the thickness of the blade, and after this you just have to place the insert in the curve maker and tighten the screw. So now we set up the stop blocks where we want to cut the first side of the groove, but place the curve maker between the stop and the piece of wood you want to cut. And we do not put it entirely in between, but only the grey section of the curve maker. And for the second cut, we place the curve maker entirely between the stop block and the piece of wood. And now it's just a matter of cutting the section in between the two cuts and your groove will be at the exact size. And I made a video about this tool where I explain it in detail, so if you are interested, I will place a link in the description of this video. The second way, which I prefer, is to use my setup blocks. I look at the thickness of my blade and just take some setup blocks with the same thicknesses. And we make the first cut with the insert we want to place in the groove between the stub and the piece of wood. And for the second cut, we place the setup blocks in between the stub block and the piece of wood. We cut away the material between two cuts and your insert will also fit perfectly. The advantage of using my setup blocks is that you have a larger capacity than when you use the curve maker, and it works faster and more securely. And of course, this does not have to be setup blocks. This will also work when you have something else that compensates for your saw blade thickness. Later I did the same with the other insert, and here the insert would have be too wide for the curve maker to use. So our curve maker does have a limited capacity. After making the grooves for the insert, I shaped my fence. And these angles are not easy to cut safely, so I use my micro-jig template in these cases. A combination of micro-jig clamps and match fit products make this platform very multifunctional and easy to use. And it works on a cabinet saw as well on a slider. And the second cut I made halfway with my bandsaw, leaving me with the last cut for the final shape. And I decided to use my router for this. I use my thin spiral bit again for this cutting. And I could have stopped here, but I wanted another layer of black MDF that was the same thickness of the miter track. And with my hammer this is easy to do. And without a thicknesser I would probably have made another design. After gluing the second layer, I just shaped it with my router again in the same size as the underpart. And finally, to make the edges smooth, I give it a sanding. And because I wanted a bit more elegant look, I made some design elements and a chamfered edge. And for the finishing touch, some engravings and ruby oil, and we created a lovely and professional looking fence ourselves. For the grooves I use my router again, and the first groove will go from side to side, so this was relatively easy. When you have to make multiple passes to get the correct width of the groove, you should always begin at the side of the fence. You should ensure there is never wood between your router bit and fence. You can only do this with the first cut, because both sides of the wood will keep the router bit in balance. But otherwise the router bit will launch your wood piece. because I want a tight fit, I mostly set up my fence 1 mm shorter than I measured, and then make small adjustments until it fit as I want. For the second groove I needed more capacity of my router table, which is why I love a router table in the workbench. You have such a large capacity, and I can enlarge it by just mounting it in other dog holes. I did not want this groove through the end of the platform, and I liked it more when it stopped before the edge. And to do this I needed a stop block, so I clamped a corner square on my workbench as a stop block. And finally I needed to make the rounding square so the miter track would fit nicely. And the last groove is on the side, and although this process is the same, it is not as stable. And with this groove I also use a stop block, but this time it was in the range of the fence, so I could place it on it. The only thing I had to do now is make the hole for the dust extraction, which I also did with a template and router table. And for a better look I made a chamfered edge. And although the chamfer bit has a bearing, I use my fence as a guide when possible, because that makes the chamfer just a bit cleaner. And finally I could place some oil on it. I use Rubio oil, and in this case Rubio Pure. This gives a very nice matte finish. And when that was ready I could place the miter tracks, and I did some sanding to the miter track so it fits perfectly with the platform's edge. Well, that was the how to build video, and I hope you liked it. To make something complex or nicer than practical necessary is a choice. And I like to do that because I find the results rewarding in most cases. But it also gives me the most satisfaction when the cuts are accurate and everything fits perfectly. Besides that, the more you challenge yourself in a project, the more experienced you will become. But when I design something, the practical point is always leading. But when that is covered, I just want to be proud of what I make. Thank you for watching, and when you made it this far you probably liked it, but please let me know in the comments. All the best, take care, and well, we see each other next time.